Well, hello everybody. It's another cooking video and a few clips from the garden. There's lots of hot chili peppers in the hoopos and lots of ripe tomatoes. So I'm making my very first batch of hot sauce, which I think turned out fairly well. Certainly is hot enough anyway. And then to close off, I promised somebody that I would give some better explanation of Egyptian walking onions and show exactly how it is that they form their little onions. Well, it was time to remove this year's top crop of Egyptian onions and plant them for next year, so I've added a clip of that. Also another look at the Good King Henry, which is doing very well and is in bloom. Not much of a blossom, but it's in bloom. And I think the final thing that closes this off is a look at some ladybugs doing a good job for me eating aphids. So I hope you enjoy the video. I'm making hot sauce. Hot sauce out of what's available, I guess, rather than exactly following the recipe here. The recipe calls for 2 quarts. It's 8 cups of chopped tomatoes. And of course it says red ripe tomatoes, well, which is approximately, I guess, 12 tomatoes according to them. So anyway, I've picked everything that was ripe in the hoopos here, the yellow pear and the gardener's delight. And then it says 1.5 cups of chopped and seeded long red peppers. Well, my peppers haven't turned red yet and the tomatoes are ready, so I'm going to use green chilies. Eventually they should all start to turn like these two have. These are the cayenne, and I'm also adding some of the Thai chilies that are still green. I find plenty of heat in these even when they're green. I'm not sure if they develop more heat when they ripen, or it's just that the skin changes color and it's a bit sweeter or whatever. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be using. I'll read the ingredients to you as the recipe has it, and as you see me go on here, you'll see that I modify as I go. The 2 quarts are 8 cups of chopped and peeled tomatoes. I'm not going to peel mine because I'm putting them through a French mill after they've been stewed for a while, and that removes the peels and the seeds for that matter, so you don't have to go to that much effort. 1.5 cups of chopped and seeded red chilies. I'm going to use whatever's there. I think that's probably 1.5 cups, all right, but I don't intend to remove the seeds. I want this to be hot and spicy. 1 cup of sugar, a tablespoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of mixed pickling spices, and altogether 4 cups of vinegar. You add it at 2 different times, and the final bit of the process you'll see is to stew it down until you get a consistency that you want before you bottle it. So really I don't think the ingredients are all that critical. You're going to reduce it down anyway until you get the thickness of sauce that you want at the end. So I'm using all that I had available. The rest of the tomatoes still haven't ripened, and as you can see the chili peppers are not yet red. We'll move on here and show you the process. It's an internet recipe once again that I found on cooks.com, the website, and it seems to me that lately I'm finding all these simple recipes. This is quite straightforward and simple, so hopefully it'll produce a sauce that I like. Well, there's everything all chopped and diced and whatever. I think I probably have more tomatoes than the 2 quarts. I wish they'd do these things in weight. I mean, what's 2 quarts? Is that 2 quarts compacted or 2 quarts loose or what? Anyway, I've already got 1 cup of vinegar in there, and there's a 2nd cup. The first part of the recipe is to bring this to a simmer with 2 cups of vinegar and simmer until it is soft, and then you put it through a sieve or a food mill, and I happen to have a food mill, which makes things a lot easier, so we'll come back when it's ready to go through the food mill. Well, they've been simmering away for at least 20 minutes or so. I think everything is soft enough. I'll try putting some of it through the food mill. Yeah, it looks quite soft. It smells very good, just the tomatoes, peppers, and vinegar. don't get a chance to use this very often anymore, but it works very well. Especially with something like this where you're trying to hold back the skins and the seeds. Or at least most of the seeds. I'm using a medium plate or sieve, whatever you want to call it, in the bottom. There are 3 different sizes of holes that you can use. So some of the smaller seeds may still go through. Sure, I'll have to clean out the skins and whatever a couple of times before I finish here. Not sure how red my sauce will be, since half of the tomatoes were yellow and the peppers were green. It's flavor I'm after, I guess, not color. I'll bring you back when I finish this. Well, I've switched to a smaller saucepan, sticking to my theory of cooking. If you've got a clean saucepan or a dish left when you finish cooking, you probably did something wrong. Anyway, the next phase is to add a tablespoon of salt. I'm using a coarse pickling salt. I assume this is the same as any other pickling recipe. You use any salt that isn't iodized. Iodine will tend to turn things that you can brown. A cup of sugar. I tasted this, by the way, and yes, there is plenty of heat. I would say quite close to the heat that's in a commercial Tabasco sauce. And the little bag of pickling spices in, I was going to say gauze, what is that? In cheesecloth, which I hope doesn't burst open. I've tied it fairly tight there, I think. This now gets simmered for 30 minutes, stirring occasionally, I guess, because it's got that sugar. You don't want it to burn on the bottom. And the final phase, once this has reduced by about half, is to add 2 more cups of vinegar and reduce it again. But well, it's been simmering away now for 3/4 of an hour at least. I've removed the bag of spices, and now at the final stage here, you add 2 cups more of vinegar. Bring it back to a simmer or gentle boil or whatever, and reduce it to the thickness that you want. I think the thickness that I had just before I added this vinegar is what I would like. So I've probably got another hour or so of simmering to do here. I spread a little bit of it on a slice of bread with cheese and had it, and yes, this stuff is powerful. I really liked it, so here's hoping that it cans well. Well, I have it reduced, I think, as much as I want to reduce it. It's fairly thick. The recipe said that it would make, oh dear, I'm not remembering now, 3 or 4, I guess, of the half-pint jars, and I think half pint is probably a good idea. You wouldn't want to open a full pint of it, have it spoiled before you finish using it. And I have sterilized and prepared 6 jars just in case I have excess here. I didn't go too much in that first one. I'll have to take some out before I put the lid on, I guess. It says you can do an 1/8 of an inch space. This does not go into a hot water canning bath or anything. What self-respecting bacteria would live in this, right? And I think it's because it has so much vinegar in. doesn't need any further preserving. The high acid content is quite enough. And I'll bring you back when I have the lids on. Well, there was enough to make 5 full jars, and 1 jar that's, oh, I don't know, down a ½ inch or so. I'll put that jar directly in the refrigerator. I think it'll probably still seal along with the rest of them, but it has more of an air space than is recommended, so that will be refrigerated and used first, I guess. Now I've got to figure out what I'm going to do with this fiery hot sauce. I hope you give it a try. I promised somebody a couple of weeks ago that in this week's video, the one that's coming out tomorrow, not this particular one which won't come out for another week, that I would do a better explanation of what Egyptian walking onions are. Well, I'm sorry, I forgot, of course, and this is a case of better late than never, I guess. I'm including it in this little video update here. These are Egyptian walking onions, and the strange thing about them is they produce at the top of their stalk, I might as well take that off because I'm going to be planting them soon anyway. They produce a cluster of small onions, 4 in that cluster, which can be separated and planted out, and you get a new plant from each one. And the walking part of it comes from the weight of those onions as they develop on the stalk, causes the stalk to fall over, as you can see here, and I guess this one's in focus too. And those will just lay on the ground during the winter. Freezing doesn't seem to bother them at all. And next spring that cluster will take root, and as it is some distance from the mother plant, it has moved on, so they say that it has walked away. It's walking across the garden. Anyway, I'm going to take all of these clusters off today and just separate them into individual plants and put them in the ground, get them started. Those will just sort of, well, develop a bit, but they're very hardy. They overwinter very well, and those will be the larger plants next year, and grow on to the larger plants later in the year next year. These ones that you can see in the background here are ones that were planted like that earlier this spring, and I could harvest some of those now. I prefer to let them stay, and in the spring I use them as green onions. When they come up in the spring, they're already a good size. So hopefully that explains a little better what Egyptian walking onions are like. Well, I finished planting all the little bulbs. More crop for next year. I thought maybe I'd pull one here. Show you what's down there this time of year anyway. They're not large. There is a usable onion bulb there. The tops are very good, the onion greens, but there's also a small onion there that you could use. As I said, I prefer to leave them, and they're the first thing that I use in the spring. They come up and start growing very early in the spring, and I pull them and use them as green onions. I'm taking another look at my good King Henry. The plants are coming along very nicely. I certainly hope they overwinter. They're supposed to be much more substantial in the second year. I actually haven't done anything as far as harvesting any of this, but I think maybe today or tomorrow I'll pick a few of the larger leaves and cook them and see what I think of them. I've eaten a few raw, just picked them in the garden and eaten them, and I find them a bit on the tough side. I suppose if they were, sliced up a bit in a salad, they would be quite good. But the 4 larger plants, I have 4 that germinated earlier and 4 that were late germinating. The 4 larger plants that germinated earlier are all producing these blossom spikes. I guess the blossom is a chartreuse or green or whatever. It doesn't hardly show, but you can see the little fuzzy parts in there. So I'm just going to let it go to seed. Hopefully if it drops its seed in the bed here with the rest of them, that'll produce more plants next year. Well, I have 3 eggplants. One that was planted directly in the soil in a raised bed in the hoop house, and 2 that are planted in smart pots. This is one of the 2 that was planted in smart pots. A week or so ago I noticed this one had lots of aphids, so I grabbed it pot and all and brought it outside. Interesting thing, I've just walked by and looked at it. I haven't sprayed it with anything, and right now I can see 4 ladybugs that are working it, eating up. Nature is taking care of the problem out here in the garden. And the third smaller plant that was planted directly in the soil, I found aphids on it this morning, so I ripped it out and it's in the compost pile. So far the other large one that's in a smart pot seems to be doing quite well. I keep checking it and I don't see any aphids on it. I don't see aphids on anything else in the hoop house either, but I don't want to see aphids on anything else, so as I find them, these plants are coming outside. This is quite possibly the world's strangest solar fountain. I bought this little solar gizmo, I think from Amazon. One of those things that they say they're going to ship immediately. Well, they did ship it immediately from China. Took a few weeks to get here. Earlier in the summer it was working like this all day long as the sun was shining on it. If you put it into the shade or shadow across in front of it, it stops immediately because there isn't a battery for it to store. It's just working directly off the solar cell, so it needs the direct sunlight. Now, however, it has got so that it works early in the morning, and this is an early in the morning shot, when the sun is at quite an angle. And then in the heat of the day, when the sun is directly above it, it stops working again, and it works again in the evening. I don't understand what happened that would cause that to occur, but anyway, I enjoy it for the brief periods of time that it works.